Are you a Chinese national buyer looking to buy real estate here in the US and living here? In this video, we're going to share with you the 5 things you should know. Coming up. Hi, this is Kai with the Kai Wong team, helping you better understand everything you need to know about New York City real estate. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Steve Maggi from SMA Attorney Law Firm. He's an immigration attorney here in New York City. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great, Kai. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I was born in Argentina and I came here when I was 5, just like you.
Okay.
And I decided to dedicate my professional career to helping other immigrants maneuver through this complex legal system. I started SMA Law Firm 15 years ago.
Okay.
We do all things immigration, and our chief focus is working with foreign entrepreneurs and foreign companies that are launching in the U.S.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
So we actually work with a lot of clients from overseas, from China to Europe to everywhere else. So specifically for the Chinese buyers, for Chinese national buyers, what are the top 5 things that they should be aware of? Like, let's start with purchasing a property here. Is there a difference or restrictions in terms of buying for primary residence versus an investment here in the U.S.?
No, there are no restrictions, not on an immigration level at least. If you're doing 501c3 exchanges and all those things and swapping properties in and out, that's obviously different. But in terms of immigration consequences, the myth is that you need to have some sort of visa or residence here in the U.S. to purchase it. That's actually not true, as you probably know. Some of your buyers, I'm guessing, are not even living in the U.S.
No.
We work with the people who essentially want to come to the U.S. And so the other part of that is that they need to do something else to procure a visa that's not just based on an investment in property.
Got it. What are some visa options that they have available to them?
Well, it really depends on what they want to do here.
Okay.
The one visa that's not available to Chinese nationals is the E2, which is for entrepreneurs, which allows people to do a startup, unless they have a passport from another country. So there's a growing tendency now for Chinese nationals to obtain foreign passports from other countries, including Grenada. Grenada has a citizenship program based on investment that allows people to get their citizenship quickly. And so there are a lot of Chinese nationals that are getting E2 visas through their Grenadian passports.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I haven't heard about that too much, especially from the immigration attorney perspective.
Well, it's very useful for them because, as you probably know, because there are so many applicants for visas from China, and there's an annual quota per country, there are backlogs on almost all immigrant visas coming through China.
What's the quota for China?
The quota depends on what the category is. The number changes, but unfortunately the population of China is increasing rapidly, and the quotas don't keep up with that. So you're looking at backlogs for family cases of several years. For investor visas, you're looking at 3 years now in backlogs. And then for professional visas as well, there are backlogs, which really changes your family planning and your planning in terms of staying in the US once you're here.
I hear a lot about people from China talk about the EB-5 option. What's your perspective of that? Does that fall under the category that you were mentioning in terms of the backlog?
Yeah, EB-5 essentially, it really took off about 13 years ago. And then it wasn't until about 6 years ago that the annual limit, which is 10,000 per year, was met. And the problem is that the law didn't anticipate this many petitions. 87% of petitions are filed by people from the People's Republic of China. And so the problem with that is that once you get to the 10,000 visas per year, there's a retrogression. It's applied after 7%, essentially 7% per country. So now if you think about 87% of petitions filed by Chinese nationals, and then a 7% annual cap that's applied retroactively, there's a backlog now of 3 years, and because the Chinese nationals continue to invest in EB-5, that backlog is growing. And since Congress essentially does not make new law under this administration, that's only going to get worse. And so we think about alternatives for those EB-5s.
When someone applies for a visa, right, for these different options, are they just applying for themselves, or would they be also applying for, family members or spouse, and how does that work?
So essentially, I'll give you 2 examples. If there's a family-based petition that's approved, generally someone can bring their spouse and their children with them and include them in the process. The same thing goes for the EB-5 program. If you apply as a principal investor, you can also include your spouse and your children in the petition and bring your family with you. But that's not always the case. Generally, there's a way to bring your dependent spouse and children with you when you apply.
So in terms of the EB-5, you're saying that there's such a backlog of it, right? What other alternative options are there?
What we've been exploring recently, because if you add the processing time for EB-5, which is 2.5 years, and the backlog for Chinese nationals, which is 3 years, you're looking at essentially 5 to 6 years minimum, and that's growing in terms of just waiting to be able to enter the U.S. So what we suggest is if people have $500,000 or more to invest, and they have an existing company in China, or they can set up an existing company, they can then set up a year later a U.S. subsidiary and be transferred under the L1 visa program. That's the intra-company transferee program. And if they successfully run their U.S. business and build a team, they can get a multinational manager or executive green card based on that. So you're looking at 3 to 5 years to get green cards for themselves, for their spouse, for their children, maybe investing less than $500,000, not doing it passively, having a functioning business in both countries that brings them revenue. It's a win-win for them. So we've been doing a lot of L1 and EB1 multinational green cards instead of EB5.
So the L1 compared to the EB5, is there limitations in terms of how long the investment needs to be, what's the investment amount, and how many job creations there need to be?
It's a good question. What you're looking at when you start a U.S. subsidiary is a 1-year visa.
Okay.
Within that period of time, you have to show that you've created a small team that removes you from what's called day-to-day activities to qualify for renewal. The funding needs to be essentially 1 year's operating costs. So if you're going to create 3 or 4 jobs and you're providing services, for example, you're probably going to invest a lot less than $500,000. And if you start generating revenue by the end of year 1, you don't need to continue to invest, and you can take funds out if you need. So the money's not static. It's something that you can move if you need to, which provides a good advantage. Obviously, the one downside or the one caveat here is you need to know how to run a business.
Of course.
Right? EB5 is passive investment. You wash your hands and you wait for your green card to come in. In this case, you are fully responsible for creating a team and creating jobs.
So the pros and cons compared to EB5 is EB5, it's a higher investment, $500,000, and the money you can't touch. Versus the L1, you can actually take the funds out after the first year if the business is still able to operate with whatever funds are available.
If you're covering all your operating costs with revenue, then you can manage the funds however you like. You have free access to them. But it really requires that you be good at your business, and don't forget you have to maintain the foreign business overseas, which means it has to be legitimate business operation.
So does both businesses, foreign and also the one that they create here, have to be operational for the extent of time that you're here in the U.S.?
Yes, until you get your green card. Because it's an intra-company transfer visa, essentially that means that 2 entities have to legally be connected and continue to exist and function normally until you don't need them anymore, which is essentially when you get your green card. Once you get your green card, you can shut down one or both businesses.
How long does it take to get the green card from start to finish, where we're looking in terms of an average?
I would say about 4 years.
4 years.
Assuming that you've renewed after 1 year, then you have 2 additional years to grow your business, then you've grown it to the point where you qualify for the green card. And if that petition is approved, then you go through adjustment, which is a year. So I'd say 4 years if things are going really well, which is much faster than EB5. And it doesn't have the removal of conditions phase where you could lose your green card. Once the green card is in your hand, it's yours.
So Steve, to recap, what are the 5 things that a foreign national from China will need to know?
The first one is that they don't need to have a visa or visa status in the U.S. or reside here to purchase a property. Certainly a lot of them would like that, but they can purchase a property living abroad. And then the visa options are really weighed separately from that.
Got it. So what's number 2?
The visa options that the Chinese nationals have. Essentially, Chinese nationals are eligible for any kind of visa, immigrant or non-immigrant, except the E2 visa, which is based on treaties between the U.S. and specific countries.
Got it. What's number 3?
Is that if they have dual nationality, including a country that has an E2 treaty, like many are now obtaining the one from Grenada, they can apply for E2 visas, which allow them to set up startup companies here and come to the U.S. very quickly.
And number 4 was, we were talking about EB5?
Right, so the EB5 myth is that if you buy a property in the U.S., you can automatically get a green card. The reality is you need to invest in something that creates 10 full-time jobs.
And number 5 was, another option would be the L1.
Yeah, the biggest obstacle for Chinese nationals is that there's such a huge backlog on all immigrant visa petitions because of the quotas not keeping up with the number of applicants. And so a great alternative is the L1 visa, which requires you to have a foreign company for 1 year, set up a U.S. subsidiary, and then you can be transferred to the U.S., which allows you over time, in about 3 years' time, if you build a team in the U.S., to apply for a green card through that company.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Kai. Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. On this channel, we share with you buying, selling tips, market updates, and neighborhood guides. If you like the video, please let us know. If you have any questions you want us to answer in a future video, leave in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.